it. Let's do it.
Do it.
I mean, you're wearing it.
I am wearing
This is perfect. Do this. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Lemon Cake. I'm Amber, this is Chelsea, and we're just two moms here sharing our stories, some of our experiences, trials, triumphs, everything in between when it comes to raising our children who have disabilities, medical complexities, and all of the fun things in between.
Yep.
Today, we're going to be talking with you guys about, we're going to give 6 hopefully tangible, helpful ways for you guys to teach your children, how to be more inclusive, because we are headed back to school.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that back to school time of year, and we know that maybe you're wanting your children, as they're coming into the schools, they're going to be experiencing a lot of different children, and maybe we can teach them how to be more inclusive as they're going back and starting a new school year. And I think Chelsea and I are going to share a little bit about our children's education and what that looks like for them. And I don't know, Chelsea, you want to share a little bit about what that's going to look like for Kenan this school year?
Yeah, so for Kenan, we decided that we were going to pursue homeschool. Decided this a couple of years ago, and it just was the best fit for her. Kenan has been diagnosed with glycogen storage disorder type 1A, which means that her glucose is, she needs to have certain supplements like cornstarch or have a feeding tube and have her blood sugar checked and regulated every 2 hours or so, or it can become very dangerous. So when she was really little, I was just not really comfortable putting her in the hands of someone else. Not to say that that is wrong if your child has that diagnosis and you have a great school system, that's great. Mm-hmm. That was just something that I was not ready to do. I also had a really good experience homeschooled myself. So I experienced private school, homeschool, and public school. I had great experience with all of them. And so homeschool was kind of always on my radar. And when Kenan's diagnosis came around, and then later at 4, she was diagnosed with autism, I just felt like the best thing for her was to keep her home and for us to continue to work together. And I'm glad I did, because it's been the hardest thing I've ever chosen to do, but it's also been one of the greatest joys, because I understand her so much better and how she responds and works through things that I would definitely be missing out on if she was in an actual school. So not to say we don't take advantage of different co-ops and opportunities like that. We will be actually trying a co-op for the very first time this year, and it's kind of a loose one. We do have our own kind of made-up homeschool group. Yeah, you're welcome. I came up with that one. I apologize to everyone in the group.
So
sorry.
Cool.
But we do have regular activities we do with other kids, and Kenan is typically the only one that is a little bit different. So everyone that we have been in these co-op situations with has been very gracious and understanding, and I've learned a lot from having conversations with them about how best to interact with Kenan and help their kids adapt to that and help Kenan interact with them. This goes both ways for sure. So anyway, we will be pursuing homeschool for our 4th year this year, and I will say, if anybody out there is homeschooling, I think year 4 is where you start to feel like you actually know what you're doing. When I was starting to fill out paperwork this year, I was like, oh, I think we got it this year. Yeah.
Honestly, kudos to you guys, anyone who homeschools. I'm literally like, there's no way I could ever do it, which is ironic because I used to be a teacher.
It's always so funny. Maybe the teachers are just like, I did that and I'm not doing it again.
I'm like, that was it. And I don't know, I think there might be something different to be said about when it's your own child opposed to in a classroom with children who are not yours. And it would just look different. And I'm not to sit here and say that I'll never homeschool, but I'm always like, yeah, that's just not an option for me.
But Kai's situation is very different.
Very different.
And you have found a school that works really well for him.
Exactly.
And
like
so cool.
And I'm so excited for it. And like Chelsea mentioned, like I kind of both of our children is like very non-traditional in a sense. So Kai is actually going to be starting his last year of preschool. He could be in kindergarten, but we've decided to wait one more year. at the Ohio School for the Blind. So I'm very excited for what he gets to experience there. It's much smaller groups. It's obviously tailored to a lot of the things that he needs. And we've met with the teachers. He did a summer camp there this past summer that he flourished at. And I just feel like it's going to be the best fit for him. They have OT and PT and speech and vision therapists. So he's just going to be getting so many different supports and therapies that I'm not able to offer him by sitting at home and doing homeschooling. And, you know, even if I was thinking like, well, if we did a co-op type thing, like there's definitely a way for us to give him real life experiences that we could incorporate at school, or in a homeschool, I should say, setting. But I think this is just definitely the best route for him this year. So I'm excited to see how it's going to go.
And I've seen all these pictures from the camp that he did, and
Yes.
that's amazing.
Yes, he had so much fun.
I think that as we get into some of the topic for today about teaching your children how to be more inclusive with kids that maybe look different than them at school or have different levels of ability, we just want you to know where we're coming from. Like, I'm homeschooling, and so I am interacting with co-op groups. Right. And Kai is going to a very non-traditional school for the blind. So these are what our children are involved in.
Right.
Not to say that our perspective is limited, because we've talked to so many people and we have had so many questions ourselves. Right. And we have had conversations with other teachers and people who are taking their kid to school and asking us, you know, how would you handle these things? So we aren't limited to just the situations that we're in. And I sometimes think that people are like, well, Chelsea homeschools, so she has no idea what's going on in the classroom. Well, I was there myself at one point.
Absolutely.
And I'm still very involved in a lot of friends' lives who are plugged into the school system. Right. So we've just chosen this to be the best option for our kids. Yeah. And wanted to be very transparent about where they're plugging in and still offer some suggestions, because this topic isn't just for school either. This is stuff that we run into on a daily basis, just out in the marketplace with friends and family, wherever you go.
Yeah, at playgrounds and
playgrounds is a big one.
Is a big one for sure. Yeah. So absolutely. And I think too, it is important that anytime that we are sharing our experiences with you guys, like, we are coming from a place of knowing that we can't speak to everyone as a whole, you know. I mean, everybody's experiences are going to be completely different, but it comes from a place of hoping that it just provides something that you guys can take away that hopefully helps you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we ask for grace and understanding.
Yes, yeah.
Because we're just human trying to do the best that we can.
100%.
And same goes for on the other side of this camera. Yeah.
I mean, I did sit there and have to write many IEPs for 5 years and taught adaptive art classes. So I like to think that, like, you know, I spent a decent amount of time in the schools. Absolutely. Very much traditional school system, and worked with kids that were in contained classrooms too. So it's like a very large, wide range, I think. But with that, I think that's what helped us come up with this list of 6 ways. And we wanted to just kind of narrow it down, because I feel like there's so many different situations and so many different outlets that hopefully this would be something that you guys would utilize and teach your kids in school, and like Chelsea said, in any other environment. So I'm going to kick us off.
Go for it.
With number 1, we have educate yourself and your child. I think it's really important to have these conversations with your child ahead of time. I mean, I know they probably just started school maybe last week or a week or 2 ago, or maybe you're starting next week. But maybe they've already been to school and they've already noticed that there's a child in their class that is a little different than them. Maybe they have an aide with them at all times. Maybe they're nonverbal. Maybe they are in a wheelchair or wearing a backpack, or have a feeding tube, or have to go to the nurse to check their sugar levels. Right. And your kids are noticing that and they're picking up on it. So educating yourself in that manner, so that you can have a conversation with them, is just so important. And we are big proponents of books. So that was the one thing that we are definitely going to expand on this in the future and share, because there are so many children's books that are coming out nowadays that you can read with your kid and have a conversation about what it might look like for someone who's a little different than them, and how they can be involved in their life and just be educated on it.
Do you want to go over any of those now? That's what I was just pulling up. I was like, what were those books that I just ordered?
Yeah, and maybe we can
Got
tag them in the
I've got 4 that
yeah,
I've
I've got
just placed an order for.
Awesome. I've got 3, so we'll share a couple of those with you guys really quickly.
Yeah.
And then we can also share them in the notes too, so that way you guys can find them yourselves.
And we'll probably do like a little bit of a book review and share these in more depth, like Amber said, because I personally have not read these, just heard good things about them.
Right.
So,
Well, I've bought a couple of these for our inclusive play space, the Planasium that we just recently shared with you. So one of them is called Gary's Gigantic Dream. It's actually it's called the Abel's Fables. I follow her on Instagram. She has a lot of great stuff, great apparel, things like that. Her message is awesome, and they really focus on building inclusive playgrounds, which is so amazing, the work she's doing. So I really love that one. They have several others. I think that she maybe just came out with her 4th book, but I think it was. I like Gary's because he's in a wheelchair, and so we're obviously partial to that with Kai. So that's a fun one, and I read that one with our daughter too. Another one I really like is called No Such Thing as Normal. I think that the author's name is Megan. I know I also connected with her on social media. But this one I know follows through several different scenarios. So there's kids, I think it's 2 brothers, and they go to a park and they go somewhere else, and they're asking their mommy about someone who's different. And she explains to them how no one's normal. We all have something that's different about us. And it's just really simple for kids, and I think it's a really, really good resource. What are some of the ones you found?
I just ordered When Charlie Met Emma. Have you heard of that one? Okay, this is when Charlie goes to the playground and sees Emma, a girl with limb differences who gets around in a wheelchair. He doesn't know how to react at first, but after he and Emma start talking, he learns that being different isn't bad, sad, or strange. It's just different, and different can be great.
I love that.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that one. And then Mighty Mara, about a little girl in a wheelchair. And then Remarkably Remy, which is a pre-order. This one is not quite out yet, but looks like it's going to be shipping early September, by Melanie Hayworth. And Remy is autistic, and why do I get emotional?
Because that's the life we live.
I'm fine.
She's fine, everyone. She's fine.
It's just very, I believe, if I remember right, the woman who wrote this is actually on the spectrum and has 2 special needs kids. And it says this focuses on his remarkable brain. And anyway, very optimistic looking book. So those are a few that I picked out, and I feel like there was another one. Oh, I did not order this yet, but I will mention it because I have heard very good things, and it's called Too Much, and An Overwhelming Day. Too Much, An Overwhelming Day by Jolene Gutierrez, and it is about like sensory challenges.
Getting like overwhelmed, overstimulated.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So Kinnan has never been diagnosed with a sensory challenge or sensory disorder.
Right.
But one of the things that was pretty high on the list when she was diagnosed with autism were sensory challenges.
Right.
So when we found the Planasium and you had that calming room, I was like, this is our place.
This is it.
And it is still to this day, 4 years later, like her favorite thing about the Planasium.
She loves to go in there and just read.
She gets her books and she closes the curtain and she gets her quiet time.
A lot of these books are in there.
Yeah. You have another one in there about being different. That was really...
Yeah, I actually think there's probably 6 or 7 other ones that we have that we'll have to dig up when we do our book review, because I definitely know there's like a lot more that we've looked into and we have at our play space that are really great resources.
Cool.
So
if you guys are watching this and you have, well, obviously if you're here, you're watching this. If you have book recommendations, send them over to us, or questions, or like, hey, have you ever heard about a book that goes through this disability or disorder? Let us know. We'll do a little research and then we can put together a really good catalog.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
Send them our way for sure.
All
so
right.
Educate yourself.
Educate yourself.
What is number 2?
Number 2 is stop staring and start sharing. And this is huge because we just want to encourage people to simply say hello. Sometimes, and kids do this, and at first it kind of caught me off guard the first couple times. Like little kids would just stare at Kenan, and I was like, I kind of felt like a deer in headlights too. We like mimicked each other. They were a deer in headlights, so I became a deer in headlights. Kenan was still just doing her own thing because she's not paying attention.
Right.
But I immediately realized that sometimes little kids just need help learning to say hello.
Yep.
And they're probably scared. You know, they're not maybe a fearful child, but they're seeing something new for the first time, and that can be uncomfortable. And so on my part as Kenan's caregiver and parent, I'm comfortable stepping in as long as I'm getting kind of the okay vibe from that other parent or caregiver, that it's okay to welcome that child into our space and say, hey, what's your name? And help them make that connection.
Right.
Little ones often need that, I think. And so, yeah, there's no need to stare or look away. You can just introduce yourself, starting with your name. Kenan, when she was learning how to talk around the age of 4, communication was really difficult. And so the first thing that we did was we actually started teaching her. We'd go to the playground and we'd say, Kenan, do you see that little girl over there? We're going to go say hi to her. And we would walk up together. I'd hold her hand. Sometimes she'd look down and like be really nervous. But over time, she started going up to the kids on her own and just saying, hi, my name is Kenan. And then the next step was, okay, Kenan, now we're going to teach you how to say, what's your name? And then to say, would you like to play with me? And I think that's a great way to help break that ice, is just saying, hi, what's your name?
Right.
It's as simple as that. It takes work. And I'm going to say with Kenan especially, it was not an overnight thing. This was a repeated behavior we trained her on for months before she would take action on it on her own.
And I think it's important to remember, like, that's the first thing that you and that person are going to have in common, because everybody has a name.
Yep.
So if I know we were taught at the very beginning, and years ago when we were younger, it used to be like, don't stare, because that's rude.
Right.
And it's not about being rude. I almost find it more rude if you're like I don't know, ignoring on purpose and intentionally.
Right.
You can look and smile, and maybe it's not the time for that conversation. That's all right. And it may just be as simple as saying hello and asking the name, like they did with Kenan. And then you'll realize that maybe that child in the future is going to say, I see that friend over there in a wheelchair, and they're going to be more confident to go up the next time if they've been approached too. So,
can you speak to Kai's situation a little bit though? Because Kai is not going to answer that question.
Right. So, and I think we talk more about this later too, but it is very important to me that someone addresses Kai first, because he's a person. And you know, he is not going to be able to say, hi, I'm Kai, what's your name? But what I can do is assist him in that, but he can still hear. And he still knows someone is there. So acknowledging him first, asking what his name is, and then and whoever else he is with, his grandmother, eventually his sister, can chime in and say, you know, this is Kai, and ask for that friend's name and facilitate the conversation. But I think that even if you're unsure if that child is able to verbally speak with you, to still direct that conversation to them exactly as you would with any other child. Yeah.
And that really rolls us right into point 3.
It sure does, because point 3 is starting a conversation. So you've stopped staring, you started sharing, you asked their name, you said hello, you asked their name. It's okay to start like asking some questions. And I think that there's just like this, like maybe little umbrella statement of, I want to say, just watch your tone.
Yes.
It's just simple to be kind. I mean, if we are just aware, I have never had a problem with somebody who is curious about Kai. A parent who maybe is with a child who wants to ask, or just a parent alone, because I'm happy to educate, because the more we educate, the more common it becomes.
Right.
And they're looked at as less different, and they are included. But just watching your tone is something as simple as that. Avoiding things like what's wrong with you and all of that. But ask things that they like. Maybe you'll find that they have similar things in common, but you could share things that you like with them. If we're talking about a kid, it's something as simple as, I see that you have brown hair like I do.
Right.
Or what's your favorite color? Or do you also like watching Peppa Pig? I don't know, maybe that's a little young. I have a 2-year-old in my house. So, or something along those lines. Ninja Turtles, there we go.
There
it's
we
more
go.
appropriate.
Yep.
So just asking that child directly, having that conversation with them, and the caregiver can jump in as needed, and just starting the conversation with them.
Yeah. And point 4 is just making that connection. Pointing out things that you have in common, like Amber said.
Yeah.
And with little kids, sorry, I was like looking at some of my notes as you were talking, because with little kids, it's so easy to train them while they're young, and they'll be a lot more comfortable. It becomes harder. I think it's almost harder for adults.
Absolutely.
We're the ones that maybe feel more awkward, but if you can start working with a little kid and find that thing, maybe you have just a couple of phrases up your sleeve that are kind of on ready when you do see somebody that's a little bit different, so you don't feel stuck, because some of us just aren't exposed to people that are different every single day. I mean, it's our life. And for people that are close to us, they're very familiar. But I know I was talking to a few people just over Instagram, and they're like, I don't even actually know anybody that's autistic, like close to me. I know of people, I know like association, but I don't have anyone close to me that is autistic, or I don't really have anyone close to me that has any disabilities or disorders. And that maybe that's their life, that's their circle, that's fine. So whether it is a small child or an adult, having little phrases that you start training yourself on, like for a kid, it's so easy to talk about things you like food or toys. I know with Kinnan, she immediately Kai carries this drum around. So she's like, what's this drum all about? Like they can connect on that drum, and she can ask things like, what does your wheelchair do? Does it go fast? So and
simple.
It might sound like a silly question, but it's a connection. So I think that's the big part about making that connection is, and as Amber said this briefly before, avoid things like, why do you have that, or that's weird, or you're different. I do remember being at a playground once with Kinnan, and this was the first time I had kind of it was an overwhelming experience. I had a lot of grace, because again, it was one of those situations where they just didn't know, but it was still hard for me to process, and it's going to probably sit with me forever. I mean, I'm over it, but it's something that I'll always remember, that it was hard. And somebody came up to Kinnan, and they were trying to play with her, and I was trying to explain that Kinnan plays a little bit differently, and maybe you could do this or that, and trying to help them. And after a few minutes, this little girl was like, she's just weird. And that hurts so much, because my little girl is sitting there thinking she has a new friend, and she honestly has no idea. She had no concept of what those words, she's weird, meant. So she didn't know that this little girl was potentially being hurtful. And I'm thankful that she did not understand that, because I think that would have really broken my heart. But the hard part was that the other parent did nothing. And again, I think it was out of they just didn't know what to do, and it was a little awkward. But if we can prepare ourselves ahead of time, and I'm speaking to myself, because there are kids that have different things like trachs or oxygen tanks and different things that I don't see that often, but I can still train myself now through books or through just having kind of a repertoire of questions to ask if I do run into that, and teaching those to my kids.
And I think that what I meant to mention earlier too is, when it comes to asking the questions, it's just, I had a friend, and I was telling Chelsea before this, she didn't realize that it was just okay to ask. You almost just don't realize that no one's told her or anyone before, just approach that person and ask a question. So I think that it's not the problem of the question being asked, it's just the way that it's being asked. But it's totally okay. And let your kiddos ask. Because even if you're like, oh, maybe you shouldn't have said that, we understand that it's coming from a child. And their curiosity. And it's so innocent. And I would rather that child be more comfortable to even try and ask something about my child than to ignore them entirely.
I honestly think that goes for adults too.
Oh, for sure.
Like,
For sure.
And this is not everybody. We can't speak for every parent out there.
Mm-hmm.
But I know Amber and I both have a lot of grace with people and try not to take any offense, because that's a very hurtful place for us to sit in. So we would rather people just say, hey, I'm not really sure what to say.
Right.
But I want to ask, I want to learn.
Right.
That is fine. If somebody comes up and is like, why are they different? Or
what's wrong?
What's wrong with them? Like, that's the worst.
Well,
Because
nothing.
yeah. Plus, it's like, how do you answer that?
Right. He's like, I don't know, what's wrong with
Do you want a list of diagnoses?
Right, exactly. Are you asking for his medical record?
Yeah. But that's 0.5 too.
It is.
Jump into that one.
We did. We keep getting ahead of ourselves. Sorry. 0.5 was ask them questions. It was supposed to be
They all go together.
Yes.
We'll make these concise at the end too.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
The 0.5 was asking them questions, allowing your kids to be curious, have them learn more about their diagnoses and their equipment. So Chelsea mentioned asking about the wheelchair, asking what is her backpack for? How does it help her?
Oh, kids love asking about Kennan's feeding tube.
Yes.
Actually, they love staring at it because they're super like, what in the world is this tube doing going into her stomach?
Right.
But some kids will straight up ask, and I love that. But if I notice a child is watching,
right,
I bring them in, and I'm like, because Kennan's comfortable with it. I've talked to her about this and made sure that she's comfortable and doesn't feel weird too. She likes showing people her Mickey butt, and she's proud of it.
Right.
So we bring them in.
I think that's important.
And talk about like, this is how she gets her food. And usually kids are like, that's so
cool. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They think it's awesome.
And if they think it's gross, then okay, that's fine too.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think just being able to share their equipment with them is kind of a cool thing. Actually, Cameron is my youngest is like in love with Kai's AFO braces. She calls them his shoes, and she is constantly trying to put them on his feet or hers. So she puts his AFOs on that come way past her like thigh, and is trying to walk around in them. So it's like, for her, she's not going to think twice about that. In the future, if she sees another kid, she's going to think that's their shoes. You know what I mean? So and the last one, Chelsea, you want to do that one?
Yeah, so choose to be around them and just be a friend. And this can be as simple as sitting with them at lunch, sitting with them at recess, inviting them to birthday parties or gatherings. And I think a lot of times maybe they'll say no, or maybe it's just not feasible for them to attend certain things. But being asked as opposed to not being asked can mean a lot, especially to the parents.
Right.
I know there are a lot of things that Kenan has been left out of because people would assume something. And I would rather at least be asked and included, and then be the one to have to say, this one's not going to work out for us, but it means so much that we were asked.
Yeah.
But sitting, if your kid rides the school bus, having a friend on the bus. A lot of the times these kids might be alone at lunchtime, so sitting with them at lunch, inviting them into activities. This was really neat. We were on a walk a couple of months ago, and there were these little girls playing, and Kenan kind of saw them from a distance, and she goes, I want to go play with them. And I was really proud of her, because this is something that we've worked years on.
Right.
For her to want to go and play with other kids and try to make friends.
Right.
And in my heart, I'm always like, will they accept her? And the coolest thing happened when we took Kenan up to these little girls. She introduced herself. They introduced themselves back. They're all about the same age. Actually, they're a little younger than her. And they immediately started playing. But one of the mothers came in and said that, I mentioned a few things about Kenan because I noticed a few things in the play. And I was like, by the way, she has a feeding tube, so that's why the backpack and all that. And the mom was like, she's special just like my daughter. And so she had taught her daughter that she is special and she has these special features, and to always look for the special things in someone else. And that doesn't have to be a diagnosis or a disability or anything like that. It can be teach your kid, like, what is special about them.
Right.
And to look for the things that are special in other kids. And then it was so cute because the two of them, in their own little way, communicated about what was special about them. And I just thought that was just a really good way to educate kids on looking at differences as things that can be positive and a good thing, and it's not always bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not something that's wrong.
It's not wrong or scary.
Or scary.
It's just different, and different can be really good, and it can open conversations and deepen connections. And
Yeah, almost thinking of replacing the word different with just special, which is ironic because we've talked about special needs, and I know that term gets a bad rap, but truthfully, thinking of it as we all have something special about us. It could be something as simple as like someone has beautiful freckles. Yeah, and that's like their special thing, but it makes it unique to them.
Yeah.
It could go both ways.
And I can do a really bad impersonation of Cher.
Right.
Special about me.
It's very special about her.
I'll never do it on
Or
here.
singing jock jams.
Or jock jams. That happened.
Right, exactly. Yes. And I want to share just really quickly, like one of my best friend's daughters just went into 3rd grade, I think. I'm sorry if I'm wrong on that. But she texted me, I think it was just last night, that her daughter came and said, I have a friend in my class, his name is XYZ, and I noticed that he was a little different, but the way she was telling her mom was, she had this big smile on her face. She actually didn't refer to Kai, because a lot of times she will say, like my friend Kai or something like that. But she was just like so excited that he was in her class, and he had a one-on-one aide with him, and she said he doesn't talk, and that this aide helps him. And like, to her, she already wants to be his friend.
Yeah.
And like, I mean,
that's so cool.
That's years of us, teaching her that it's okay to have that conversation. And those are the kind of things that can happen in the schools if you are taking the time to include these kids.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I think just to kind of wrap things up, it can be very challenging on both sides. We understand that. Like for the child with a diagnosis and the typical child. And I hate saying like the typical or non-typical, but you guys know what I mean. Just track with me. Mm-hmm. It's hard on both sides to make friends regardless of your ability, right? You're stepping out of your comfort zone no matter who you are.
Right.
But we're all human at the core. We all want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be loved. We value connection. We value friendship. And so sometimes these visual things stand in the way of allowing that to happen, or we allow them to stand in the way of them happening. So I think it's up to adults to do a really good job teaching and training our children to make these connections, and that it is normal and it's a good thing and it's natural to do that, and just being a friend. And it's as easy as that. Like I'll tell Kenan, if she's like, I don't want to say hi to that person, because sometimes like they're kids, they say stuff like that. She's like, I don't want to say hi. I'm like, well, do you like having friends? Do you like being a friend? And she always says yes. I'm like, well, I bet they like friends too. And that usually gets her moving and at least off to say hi.
Right. So well, we're just hoping that these 6 tips that we've talked about are something that are helpful for you guys, that something here gave you an idea of a way that you could move forward with your children as you're talking about the back to school year, and maybe even for yourself as an adult. And again, we'll be sharing some more books, some other resources. If you have something, send it our way. We'd love to include it. And hope you tune in to the next episode of London Kids. We'll see you guys soon.